What's up, homies? First, I just want to apologize for the title. I feel like this title alludes to as if I know more than those who have passed away, which I absolutely don't. Or that this video is all you need to watch in order to prevent this from happening to you, which is absolutely, completely untrue. The how-to title just seems to get the message across quickest to the viewers that are scrolling through their suggested videos rather than a title like, "Why Might a Bodybuilder Die Young?" And when I think of some of the most important things to talk about, personally, this is the first topic that comes to my mind. I haven't been making as many videos on steroids or PEDs, performance-enhancing drugs, recently because it's such a touchy subject. And whilst I feel like I do the least pointless work in relaying information like this, being one who dreams of competing for Mr. Olympia, I just can't help but feel like the federation that I'm competing in is not going to be the greatest fan of this kind of content. So, of course, the best way to survive steroids is don't do them. We've all heard it 1,000 times. We all want to look like a beast, so we take cow juice in the butt without wondering why it's the color of the grease on my pizza. We already know that other than to not do it, there's really nothing else a person can do to ensure that they 100% avoid any death exacerbated by steroids. But we know some of us already do this, and we know some of us will still do it. The only thing that leaves left is harm reduction. Literally anything it takes to reduce the chance of harm from steroids. So I split this up into 7 steps just to make it a little bit easier to digest. So the first step, DNA or genetic testing for medical predispositions. Genetic predisposition is likely the greatest determination of our health if we were to hypothetically commit ourselves to the dark side. Anakin probably would have been just a crybaby if he didn't have the Skywalker gene. And it's likely a smart idea to be conscious of what we're prone to, because studies find that steroids have a domino effect on genes. And some of the best tests, I think, for these genetic tests include the Toolbox Genomics, Let's Get Checked, and Nebula Genomics. And it's just a saliva test, so super quick, easy, get it shipped to you, and normally just a one-time payment. And I think it's pretty worth it, even though most of us don't want to look at it. I get it. Step 2, we don't want to get it, we don't want to look at it, and most of us can't afford it. It's blood work. So it would be a worthy investment to have a doctor in addition to an HRT clinic, not just an advisor from an HRT clinic monitoring these markers with you. Here's a list of the things that I think are valuable to get. We don't always have to have all of them, but you know, blood work is expensive, but bodybuilding is too. So first, I'm just going to list them all. CBC with platelet. This includes RBC, which is your red blood cell count, your WBC, your white blood cell, your hematocrit, your hemoglobin, etc. Then the comprehensive metabolic panel, which includes your BUN, your EGFR, electrolytes, AST, ALT, your lipid panel with cholesterol and HDL ratio. You want to increase your HDL and you want to decrease your LDL. Your FSH and LH, these are going to be low if you're on and have been for a while. And if so, you probably won't really need these, but I mean, they're normally just part of your standard bloods. So these will change if you decide to hop off and do like an HCG and clomiphene treatment to revive your nuts and you've been off for a while. But other than that, if you're going to be running or you're on TRT, it's not very necessary, if at all. And then test and free test and estriadol, your standards. PSA total, which includes the prostate-specific hemoglobin A1C, T3, T4, TSH, DHEA sulfate. These are your thyroid, T3, T4, TSH is a thyroid stimulating hormone. IGF-1 levels, is related to growth hormone. That's your insulin-like growth factor. Your C-reactive protein, which is for risk of cardiovascular event. Your apolipoprotein A and your apolipoprotein B, which is apo little a and apo-B. You probably heard this from maybe More Plates, More Dates talking about this. He talks about this all the time. And then these two are options. I think they're good options to have, but not everybody gets tested for them. I don't think, I think I know of some HRT clinics that don't test for them, but my doctor actually requested this, and I've heard of this been taken before as well in other situations. LDH, some don't test for this, but it does indicate whether the patient may have some type of tissue damage from injury, such as a disease such as kidney disease, liver disease, or lung disease. And then GGT, which is used to detect diseases of the liver or bile ducts. I just think it's always important to get your things checked. Of course, the more you add onto it, the more things you add onto your whole program, the more expensive that the program is probably going to be. So this all comes down to you, yourself, and what you think is worth it for you. But I mean, as long as you're aware of these as options, then I think that's a good thing. And then estriadol, a lot of you guys know this as estrogen. It's E2. Some feel better with low E, some feel better with high E. It's just like PEDs, just like bodybuilding, everything. There is a huge variance per person. That's why it's really hard to compare numbers. But no matter what some say about maintaining a test to estrogen ratio, we don't want your estriadol to be that far out of range. So too high and too low estriadol both have their own long-term health consequences. Never mind the immediate shitty symptoms that you're going to feel. AIs, which some of you guys probably already know of, which is aromatase inhibitors. These are used to help elevated estrogen in range. And so going deeper into this is probably going to be a whole nother video, but essentially your estrogen's too high, you take a little bit of AIs, and then it'll help bring your estrogen back down into range. But these do tend to affect your cholesterol. So it's not, I wouldn't consider AIs something that you can just, is a good idea to just jump on without considering the possible side effects it might have itself. And then I had a convo with More Plates, More Dates, and he recommended ideally that ApoB be no higher than 60 to 70 milligrams per deciliter, which was actually honestly kind of a shock to me, because I would have supposed that as a bodybuilder you could be a little bit higher, especially since the reference range on the blood markers tests normally have a higher limit of like around 90. But he drew this from a clip with Peter Attia, and I'll link this right here. But Peter Attia stated around 2 minutes and 15 seconds his little recommendations for ApoB. And he actually said something that shocked the shit out of me. Peter Attia actually suggested that if you're in your 20s, he suggests aggressive, I don't know what the correct word is, but essentially aggressive decreasing of your ApoB to levels of around 20 to 30 in your 20s, which is, I'd say it's probably near impossible if you're running steroids or PEDs. But if you want to make sure that you have absolutely no risk of cardiovascular events in the future, such as a heart attack, then that's what you want to do. So I did also speak with some other experts and a doctor that's experienced with a lot of other bodybuilders, and I don't think you should take this to heart, but they did explain that it's not uncommon to see bodybuilders, competitive pro bodybuilders, sitting at around maybe 100 to 130 milligrams per deciliter of their ApoB. However, that doesn't mean that it's not a bad idea, and it's a good idea to do anything in their power, lifestyle factors and medications alike, to reduce it. I'd love to go deeper into each marker, but there's like so much to talk about. It would be a whole video on its own. So I brought in Gentry Manley, who's the Senior Director of Patient Services at Transcend, to help discuss these markers with me. Phase 3 is food. The nutrition that you choose to use throughout your use of steroids is a major determinant on what will happen to you and your heart. So most of us have been there. We all know the diet: chocolate milk, cereal, donuts, Five Guys, mass gainer. I think he is an absolute epic dude, and I support him highly. I feel like I relate to a lot of what he says and have been in his position, especially at his age. And he's an absolute desecrator to our egos. But it's just the first example that I think comes to most of our minds at this time of age. And so calorie-dense foods are the easiest ways to put on mass. And we all know this because it works. It's easy. And there's no easier way. But dirty bulking is pretty fucking dirty. And oftentimes our body on the outside does not reflect what is getting dirty on the inside. Taking steroids, it's kind of like eating trans fats. When you take steroids, the bad cholesterol goes up, the good cholesterol goes down, simply by being on it. So now you add diet on top. Recommended guidelines are that we shouldn't be eating more than 200 milligrams of bad cholesterol a day. And if we don't have risk factors for heart disease, then we shouldn't be eating more than 300 milligrams of cholesterol a day. However, if you're eating the diet that I mentioned earlier, the hardcore bulking diet, I bet you're consuming at least, like a minimum, at least 2,000 to 3,000 milligrams of cholesterol a day. Now, each time you eat a ton of sugar and fat, especially together, you damage the arteries. Every time you train intensely, really hard, for very long periods of time, over weeks, over months, you're just fucking killing yourself in the gym because you want to be fucking big and that's all you've ever really wanted, you can cause stiffness and damage to your arteries. I'm going to link some studies here that you guys can check out if you're interested. The excess cholesterol from steroids and food you're eating sticks to white blood cells and broken down muscle waste. That thick gunk sticks to the damage on your arterial wall. And this creates plaque. So imagine, you're taking steroids, you're 18 years old, you're 20 years old, 25, you're 30, you're 45 years old. Every year you feel literally just fine. You don't feel any different whatsoever. But that arterial wall, that hole, gets smaller and smaller and smaller and keeps shrinking. The little endothelial layer in there gets thicker and thicker and thicker because you just keep layering plaque on top of those damaged places until finally you feel your first symptom just an hour before it happens, the heart attack. Heart disease is the leading killer, just in general. Never mind also being on steroids. So this all sounds scary. Trust me, it scares the shit out of me too. This is something I've been thinking about ever since I was a little kid and I started bodybuilding. But the question that plagues my mind, how can we stop all of this from happening and keep you from leaving behind the legacy that you were meant for all too early? We can eat bad food in moderation. We can eat all those bad food choices that we love, everything that we just have to have, those juicy Wendy Baconators, those delicious waffle fries from Chick-fil-A. We can have them in moderation. We can also avoid eating a ton of sugar and fats together, like trans fats, saturated fats, maybe seed oils. There's a lot of debate over this, over what fats are bad, but there's always a correlation. And I think the easiest thing is just to avoid all of those that are correlated altogether. That's at least what I would think would be the best choice. So We can eat foods like salmon, avocado, olive oil, apples and fiber, oats. Even though one of my friends have said that oats in America are like really like processed, and then some other shit about them being layered with things. But aside from that, maybe we can even have a little stevia if it helps us consume just a little bit less sugar. So eating fish fats, ALAs, fiber, these are all correlated with a reduction in heart disease. Vigorous Steve has fish oil and magnesium with every single meal. And I'm pretty sure that he said he eats about, or consumes at about 6 grams of fish oil and supplementation a day, which is, of course, going to be a lot more than your regular person. Most people are probably only having 2 grams. But I think bodybuilders will probably need that extra. This is a big main reason why bodybuilders aim for whole and clean foods. It's important for natural athletes to eat and consume nutrient-dense foods, but a lot of the time, they can get away without doing it. For enhanced bodybuilders, however, if they care about their lifespans, this is an absolute necessary. Step number 4 is basic supplements and ancillaries that bodybuilders take on cycle or when competing. So I'm just going to list these, and then I'll describe them as I'm listing them out, but I'll list them all out first, so that way you guys can just write them down if you need to. That's TUDCA, NAC, fish oil, vitamin D, magnesium, astragalus root, citrus bergamot, CoQ10, other supports such as saw palmetto, is that how you say it? Palmetto, I've never really had to say that. Glutathione and NAD+, which are probably 2 of the biggest ones. And then on the side note, there's a bunch of other things that I can talk about. But TUDCA, I get this from Amazon just because it was easy to find off of there. Seemed easy. And the one that I got seemed to supply the highest dosage in total milligrams per price. So the highest value out of all the ones that I saw. And bodybuilders may take up to maybe 1 gram a day, but of course this totally varies. And then NAC, N-acetylcysteine, bodybuilders may take up to around 1 gram a day of this too, but again, totally varies. Fish oil and vitamin D, I mentioned this before, because fish oil is your favorite source of omega-3s. And I take all of these from Huge Supplements because they both have a fish oil and a vitamin D in their elements line. Transcend also has a high EPA/DHA vitamin D compounded with fish oil, but normally you can take up to like maybe 6,000 IUs a day. But the thing about vitamin D, who was it that said this? Andrew Huberman and Rhonda Patrick who said this, but essentially that it varies a lot per person how much vitamin D you need a day. And the best way for you to really know is just to titrate up. Say you don't consume any vitamin D and you're starting to feel some symptoms, just titrate up to the point where you don't feel those symptoms anymore, and that's probably a good dose of vitamin D. Then astragalus root, this is for the kidney. I think bodybuilders take around 500 milligrams a day. That's just a standard dose. Huge Subs has this as well, but of course the amount or the dose that bodybuilders will take will totally vary. Citrus bergamot, the standard dose for that, which is for cholesterol, is also about 500 milligrams a day. Back then, like years ago, it used to be red yeast rice that people got excited about when it came to, monitoring, or I guess monitoring cholesterol. But now citrus bergamot is kind of like the new goodie that people want to take for cholesterol. I think red yeast rice is still effective, but citrus bergamot has definitely outshone it. And Huge Supplements also has this in their elements line as well. That's where I take it. You can take it and get it from honestly anywhere though, because astragalus is just a root. Citrus bergamot, these are all over-the-counter supplements. You could probably get them on Amazon as well. You definitely can get them on Amazon as well. CoQ10, especially necessary if you're taking a statin, or if you're taking, say, red yeast rice, which kind of acts as a statin. Huge Supplements has CoQ10, and I'm sure there's other supplement companies that likely have CoQ10 as well. By the way, if you're interested in these supplements, or you need to find these supplements, I'll throw down links in the description of where I found each of these. whether or not they're from Huge or Amazon or wherever. And then supports such as saw palmetto. This is a supplement bodybuilders take for their prostate. So Huge Supplements has a supplement that is called Defend, and includes NAC, saw palmetto, milk thistle, yucca, red clover, and peppermint leaf and hawthorn berry. And I would suggest if one were to take this and they were taking a steroid cycle, I personally would suggest about 1.5 servings. There's also a supplement called Vial for Huge, and this is effective for your blood pressure. So this consists of vitamin D3, vitamin B9, magnesium, potassium, garlic extract, hibiscus flower, Terminalia Arjuna extract, ALA, grapeseed, rosehip powder, CoQ10, and vitamin K2. I think they also said it was like their best-selling supplement or product for health measures. I feel like garlic is normally a good supplement to take on the side as well, but most people don't really take that. So it's nice to have that in there. And then glutathione and NAD+, I think these are most likely going to be a bodybuilder's most effective supplements. Glutathione is the most effective antioxidant that you can find in your body. So bodybuilder coaches are most likely going to have their clients take these. And you can get these in a big dose at an IV, at a clinic, or more frequently through injections. And lots of coaches will have their bodybuilders take 3 to 5, on average, 3 to 5 grams of glutathione through IV, maybe each month, maybe every 5 weeks. Or for convenience, there's also an injectable form that you can have at home that saves you a lot of time. You'd just be injecting a similar dose, but through injection. So you'd probably want to space it out so you're not actually injecting 3 to 5 grams, because these things come in 200 milligram per milliliter vials. So you probably would want to do maybe at max like 4 to 5 cc's per week, because that'll be a whole gram. That still seems like a lot to me personally, but of course this varies. So another nice thing, Transcend offers a less painful version, because glutathione honestly stings. The harder we're running, the more important it is to definitely add these. And just on a side note, most bodybuilders do have to watch their blood sugar when they're eating a lot of carbs regularly, especially if they're running GH or a strong GH secretagogue, especially MK. Some bodybuilders take berberine or metformin to reduce their blood sugar. So these are supplements that will help you with insulin resistance because it's reducing your blood sugar, and it'll help you utilize your carbs more efficiently. Metformin is a prescribed medication for diabetes. So berberine is often the easier of the two to obtain, because berberine is just over the counter. A supplement called Utilize, and this has a very high dose of berberine. I think it's 1.5 grams, and it has cinnamon extract and a host of other ingredients. There's a ton of other places that you can find berberine. This is just a product that I have experience with, and it's the only one that I personally take. But I'm sure you'll be able to find berberine on Amazon and elsewhere. Another juicy ingredient that we find really interesting, but also scares the shit out of a lot of us, is insulin, which is not a steroid. But I'm just going to quickly brush up on this. Basically, one reason that some bodybuilders actually take insulin, aside from just getting fucking huge and trying to increase their anabolism, is to actually reduce some insulin resistance and resting blood sugar that's increased with their high carb intake and their growth hormone use. So one wrong move with dosing insulin is probably why people are so scared of it, because one wrong move, not eating enough carbohydrates, you can go hypo. And it honestly accounts for 10% of deaths for people with type 1 diabetes. So if you guys have ever heard of the dead in bed syndrome, this is basically an occurrence where you find someone just dead in bed, and we don't know why it happened, but a lot of case studies have shown that this is because they went hypo, and because they were in bed and they were asleep, they didn't know, so they weren't able to get any glucose, eat any sugar or anything to get them out of it. The next ones that aren't necessary at all, but turmeric, which is a nice anti-inflammatory. It does also decrease your DHT. So some people like Andrew Huberman tend to feel weird when they take turmeric because it decreases their DHT too much. But if you're someone on steroids, I don't think this is going to be as much of a problem for you. If you're running high levels of test, you're probably going to have high levels of DHT. This also varies per person, so it totally depends on who you are, so don't just take that for granted, especially if you're taking something such as finasteride or dutasteride that potentially could decrease your DHT more than you would have expected, since people normally just assume that it's purely a topical isn't going to be very systematic. But turmeric is a nice option, and then P5P also is another nice option to have on hand in case that you are prone to increased in hyperlactin. It's just a nice little over-the-counter supplement without having to take something like Caber. And I don't think this is normally an issue for most people, but it would be an issue. It could be a potential issue if you are running something like Deca or Tren. Benji, thanks for listening to the podcast. Just want to say it's been 1 whole year since I started the podcast, and it couldn't have gone this far without you guys. If this video has helped you, then if you'd like to support the podcast and keep it going, then you can do so by using code NILE for a discount, 15% discount off all the Young LA clothes that I wear. And they're going to have a drop this October 24th, as well as a new jacket drop October 27th, which is this jacket. This is a really crappy way to show you guys this. But that is going to drop October 27th, and all the drops are at 12 p.m. PST. And an easy way to stay up to date with all of Young LA's announcements and when they're dropping things is by just following the Instagram page. And then there's also going to be a big ass Black Friday drop on around Black Friday, which is going to be around November 24th. And you can also use code NILE for a discount off of any huge supplement products too. And that'll also help support the podcast. Thanks, homies. So, medications. The medications, if needed, you don't always need these medications. It depends on how hard you're going, etc. You know, are you a pro competitive bodybuilder who is 250 pounds and you're years on and you're older? Or are you someone that's just started? Either way, I think it's good for you to know that these are options and potentially something that you should take. So the medications, if needed, more plates and more dates, more plates and more dates, more plates, more delts, and Vigorous Steve have mentioned this quite a few times. But ARBs, which are angiotensin receptor blockers, ezetimibe, which reduces LDL by 15 to 20% or 15 to 22%. It's essentially it's not as effective as statins, or it hasn't been shown to be, but it's also shown to have less side effects. So people tend to like to take this as a just in case. And then statins or baby statins, these reduce your cholesterol. And then finally a beta blocker, which is going to slow and potentially reverse heart remodeling. So not all bodybuilders take all of this. Each one normally depends on what a person is genetically prone to and honestly how hard they're going and pushing it. But it's likely most probable that an open bodybuilder is probably going to be taking these. I mean, open bodybuilder as in like a pro open bodybuilder that's been like doing this shit for a long time and just fucking massive, and you know, he's older. That stuff gets a little bit dangerous. You know, you start walking a very like thin line there. So I'm sure that they'd probably be taking these medications. And then step 5, regularly check your blood sugar, your blood pressure, and your blood glucose, which is your blood sugar. So it would be smart to ensure that blood pressure stays below 120/80. Fasted morning glucose, you probably want that below 100, because 100 and above is pre-diabetic territory. And if blood shows an elevated RBC, hemoglobin, or hematocrit, you might want to donate blood. However, if your platelets and ferritin are low, this might not be such a good idea, because then you could potentially have dizziness, fatigue, feeling really weak and anxious. You probably might not have as thick of blood as you would need to donate blood for. However, if you have high ferritin and high platelets, which is why it's a good idea to get platelet into your CBC in your blood work, then it's probably a good time to donate blood. Stan Efferding actually recommends that his athletes don't donate blood within a month or two of a competition. And then sleep apnea, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of, especially if you're fucking huge, can also cause a risk in a rise in blood pressure and honestly a lot of other issues. So it's likely pretty smart to check for this, especially if it looks like you're starting to lose your neck. And then left ventricular hypertrophy and cardiac remodeling is something to look out for. That's why it's probably a good idea to take some supplements that are good for that, such as, well, it's not a supplement, but the medication, the beta blocker. And then also, in addition to that, take some supplements for blood pressure. However, you can keep your blood pressure below 120/80. You should definitely try doing that. And so that brings us to step 6, the sexy step 6 that we all love so much, which is totally why we started lifting in the first place. Fucking cardio. So research has shown that your VO2 max is actually among the strongest predictors of a future cardiac event, like a heart attack. And Dr. Peter Attia has actually suggested and claimed that he believes the VO2 to be the greatest predictor of longevity, which you can understand why VO2 max is probably an important marker for a bodybuilder to look at, though I don't know if a lot of bodybuilders do actually look at this. Bodybuilders do add a lot of zone 2 cardio simply for, I mean, a lot of them do it for the purpose of burning calories and trying to stay lean. But I think the most effective, and I believe most bodybuilders understand this, that the most effective part is just trying to do enough cardio to bring down your LDL. And so a lot of these do this zone 2 cardio, like power walking or quick stairmaster that raises their heart rate to maybe about 130 BPM, which of course this totally depends on your max heart rate, because normally you want to hit a percentage, but I think on average it'll land normally around 130. And it can also be pretty smart to add in zone 5 cardio, which is the most effective at increasing your VO2 max, if not the. So this is like HIIT sprints or like HIIT max effort biking or cycling, like I'm sure Greg Douchet does a lot of. Greg Douchet. So step 7 is x-rays and a lot of other things to check up on yourself. Basically, if you've been on for a long time or you feel like you're approaching a danger zone, this would probably be a necessary if you're approaching a danger zone. I think it's still a good idea to get when you can get it. I had a conversation with More Plates where he said, I, as an example, hypothetically wouldn't need, say, the scan that I'm about to talk about because I'm so young, and it probably won't really show much. But if you have the money, I think, your life comes first, right? Because when you die, then what's the point? Except for, I mean, your money can, of course, go to your children. This is me doing some high thoughts right now, sorry. But the CT angiogram is an imaging test to view your arteries and see where you stand soft plaque-wise. So if you feel like you've been stacking up that plaque and you can't feel it over time, then the CT angiogram is going to be how you can see that. Because you don't want to end up having that 70% blockage and then having the doctor come up to you and be like, hey bro, you need a stent because you might die. And then there are other scans that may be important for a bodybuilder, but that of course totally depends on what they're susceptible to. This is why it's pretty important to monitor these things regularly with a doctor. So you never know what might happen to any of your organs, because PEDs affect your organs, not just your heart. And so, if you end up having like liver issues, you might have to get a liver biopsy, might want to get MRIs on that. Same thing with your kidney, all of the above, get all these things checked. Maybe even cancer screenings, but these are all down the line and things that just should be considered. And then something else that I just want to brush upon really quickly, which because it's like a really big part in the bodybuilding competitive community, is diuretics. And I'd say out of all the things above, diuretics are probably the one that is essentially the most probable to instantly kill you. And if you're already dehydrated and you're doing it from manipulating water, and say it's like peak week prior to a show, then adding this, especially more than you need, can be an absolute disaster. Honestly, I myself even had one experience way back in the day with a coach where luckily wasn't a fatal occurrence at all, but I was so dehydrated and I was definitely lacking in electrolytes so much. I was cramping up so hard. My poop was rock hard, bro. My poop was rock hard, and that shit was huge, and it just kept stacking up in there to the point where I remember sitting on the toilet, like calling my coach, like panicking, like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Is just like take these supplements, take potassium, magnesium, and then sip on a little water. I thought my entire ass was just going to explode. There's way worse disasters than that when it comes to diuretics. That was just my only example for myself. Anyways, this just covers the general ballpark. There's always more a person can do to be proactive about their health. And a lot of these I didn't even cover in the video. So even after all of this, it still doesn't ensure that a person can survive using steroids. I mean, I feel like a lot of what we do these days does have a level of fatality risk. Even something as simple as driving a car or going on a plane. But performance-enhancing drugs, especially steroids on the level of bodybuilders, increases that risk a lot. So this is why a lot of the game that hardcore bodybuilding adds on top of natural bodybuilding is harm reduction. So some of this stuff that I talked about in the video can be found on Amazon. Some of this stuff can be found from Huge Supplements or Transcend. I've linked these all below in the description. I didn't even talk about other things that you can take from Transcend, such as BPC or TB500 for recovery, but these aren't things that are necessary for bodybuilders to take, which is why I didn't mention it. Like, you don't need BPC not to die. It's just a nice thing to take if you have an injury and you would like to heal up quick or quicker. And you can get this from an HRT clinic. I don't think it's a good idea to get any HRT medication or honestly any steroid over the internet or from UGL. So I've linked all of these things below in the description. And then if there's anything that I didn't cover that you guys would like to address, please do. Please do. I'm always willing to know more, and I hardly know anything. So I love you guys so much. Please stay safe. I really want us to all make it. This is literally like the funnest sport in my opinion. I love this sport so much. So I would love it if it continued and didn't have such a terrible bad connotation that it does have these days. Let's just all get fucking jacked. Love you guys. Young LA, discount code Nile, 15%.